Here's a fact most Americans don't know. Canada supplied 62% of all American oil imports last year. Mexico, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela combined just 14%. Canada isn't just a friendly neighbor, it's America's energy lifeline, and Trump just threatened to cut it. February 1st, 2025. One executive order, 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, 10% on Canadian energy, oil, gas, uranium, critical minerals. Washington called it leverage, called it strength. But here's what nobody tells you. Those tariffs don't hurt Canada first. They hit American refineries, American car plants, American gas stations. Your bill. Trump believed Canada had no choice but to fold. He treated it like a pressure test. It became something else entirely, because while Washington was busy making threats, Canada was in quiet meetings. Brussels, Tokyo, Abu Dhabi, signing deals America didn't know were happening. By the time the White House found out, it was already done. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what Canada actually is to the United States, not what politicians say it is, what the numbers say it is. The U.S. imported $97 billion worth of Canadian oil and gas in a single year. U.S. Midwest refineries were literally engineered around Canadian crude, built to process it because it was cheaper and guaranteed. You can't swap that out overnight. And beyond oil, Canada holds reserves of all 12 minerals that NATO identifies as essential for defense manufacturing. It actively produces 10 of them. Canada was supposed to be America's answer to Chinese supply chain dominance, the safe, stable, democratic alternative. So what did Trump do with this relationship? He put a price tag on it. On February 1st, 2025, Trump signed executive orders slapping 25% tariffs on Canadian goods and 10% on Canadian energy, oil, gas, uranium, and critical minerals. The official justification was border security and fentanyl. But Canada accounts for less than 1% of fentanyl entering the United States. The math didn't add up. The real message was simpler: fall in line or feel the squeeze. Wall Street responded immediately. GM dropped 3.1%. Ford fell 2%. Stellantis lost 4.5% within hours, because investors understood what Trump apparently didn't. You can't tariff a 40-year supply chain without the consequences landing at home first. Analysts estimated that if the tariffs held beyond 6 months, the average car price would rise $4,000 to $5,000. Some EV models, up to $12,200 added to the sticker price. Gas prices could jump $0.75 per gallon overnight. The Budget Lab at Yale estimated the average American household would lose $1,200 in purchasing power. Trump called it America First. Economists called it a self-inflicted tax on American consumers. Here's the thing about Mark Carney that Washington didn't understand. Before he was Prime Minister, he was Governor of the Bank of Canada and then the Bank of England. He doesn't think in poll numbers. He thinks in risk models and diversification strategies. When Trump escalated tariff threats in late 2024, Carney didn't call a press conference. He made calls, quietly, legally, and with precision. In June 2025, Carney signed a strategic defense and security partnership with the European Union, opening the door for Canadian companies to participate in Europe's $125 trillion Defy 200 spending program. He then traveled to Germany, Ukraine, and Poland, meeting with business and political leaders on trade, energy, critical minerals, and AI. Real deals followed. Canadian company Trollis Gold struck a copper supply agreement with Hamburg-based Aurubis. Quebec-based Torngat Metals signed with Germany's Vakuumschmelze for rare earth supply. Rocktech Lithium agreed to process battery-grade lithium material in Germany. These weren't handshakes. These were signed contracts with real production timelines. Then Carney moved east. At the APEC summit in South Korea, he met with leaders from Australia, Chile, China, Japan, Singapore, and Thailand. He launched free trade negotiations with Thailand. He reset Canada-China relations, announcing a new era of pragmatic engagement. The Indo-Pacific region, Canada's second-largest trading partner with over $260 billion in annual trade, was being courted at the highest level. Then came the biggest move. In November 2025, Carney traveled to Abu Dhabi. He signed a foreign investment promotion and protection agreement with the UAE, and the UAE pledged $70 billion in investment into Canada, focused on critical minerals, energy, ports, and artificial intelligence. Smart Trade, a senior official, said this investment would occur over approximately 1 year. Columbia University Carney set an explicit goal: double non-U.S. exports over the next decade, an additional $300 billion in annual overseas sales, and attract $500 billion in new private sector investment into Canada over 5 years. Columbia University. This was not a reaction to Trump. This was preparation that Trump's pressure simply accelerated. Every tariff warning pushed Canada to diversify faster. Every insult reinforced the internal message: depending on a volatile White House was a structural risk. Canada was now reducing that risk, not emotionally, mathematically. Here's what Washington doesn't want to admit: Canada's pivot isn't political symbolism. It has real compounding economic consequences, and most Americans won't feel them right away. They'll feel them later, quietly, in their bills. Start with the mineral supply chain. The U.S. is in a critical minerals race against China. Washington has poured billions into building domestic supply for lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite, and rare earths, all essential for EV batteries, defense systems, and advanced electronics. But domestic mining projects are years from full production. Alternative suppliers exist: Indonesia, parts of Africa, South America, but none offer the proximity, political stability, or existing infrastructure Canada does. Canada has now designated copper, lithium, graphite, cobalt, nickel, and rare earths as strategic national priorities. The government is setting minimum prices and guaranteeing long-term demand so Canadian mines and processing facilities get built faster for Europe, Asia, and the Gulf. Not necessarily for Washington first. Then there's energy. U.S. Midwest refineries were built specifically around Canadian heavy crude. Reconfiguring them to handle different grades from other countries would cost billions and take years. So even a modest shift in Canada's export priority creates a supply squeeze that U.S. refiners feel immediately. That squeeze moves downstream to distributors, to gas stations, to your tank. Commodity traders are already pricing this in. Futures contracts adjusted. Analysts revise cost projections for U.S. manufacturers dependent on Canadian inputs, not because everything stops tomorrow, but because certainty decreased. And certainty is everything in economics. When certainty falls, businesses build price buffers. Price buffers become higher costs become inflation. Inflation doesn't care about political messaging. Then there's the corporate intelligence signal. Major U.S. businesses plan investment cycles years in advance. Supply chains are built around predictability. If corporate America starts believing that U.S.-Canada trade is structurally unreliable, not temporarily disrupted, but permanently changed, they will hedge, they will diversify, and once private capital shifts its expectations, reversing that perception takes years of policy credibility that no executive order can instantly rebuild. Trump built his strategy around pressure, but pressure only works if the other side has nowhere to go. Canada just built somewhere else to go. Here's the part nobody in Washington wants to say out loud: even if this tension cools tomorrow, the old relationship is gone. Because this was never just about oil prices or mineral contracts. It was about trust. And trust, once broken between neighbors, doesn't snap back. For generations, the U.S. and Canada operated as a single economic and security fortress. Shared defense, shared intelligence, integrated supply chains. At the center of it all is NORAD, the binational military command defending the airspace of both nations. U.S. and Canadian jets are scrambled together to monitor Russian aircraft near the Arctic. That is how deep this integration runs. But political trust and military trust are not the same thing. A survey by the University of Calgary and Nanos Research found that 58% of Canadians now identify the United States under Trump as their top national threat. Not Russia, not China, the United States. That is a generational rupture in the psychology of a country that once treated Washington as its closest ally. Canada responded by building strategic autonomy at a speed it had never attempted before. Carney committed Canada to reaching NATO's 2% defense spending target. The government announced investments in icebreakers, Arctic infrastructure, and submarine procurement, buying technology from Australia rather than the US, a deliberate signal. Canada joined Europe's $1.25 trillion defense industrial program. It is now building supply chains, defense capacity, and trade relationships designed to function with or without Washington's cooperation. The geopolitical stakes go beyond North America. Russia and China are both aggressively pursuing influence in the Arctic, a region where melting sea ice is opening new shipping lanes and exposing vast untapped energy reserves. Russian naval and bomber deployments near Alaska are escalating. Joint Sino-Russian exercises have extended into the Bering Sea. America needs Canada's geography, Canada's Arctic expertise, and Canada's icebreakers more than it has ever publicly admitted. Fracturing that partnership doesn't just cost trade, it costs strategic position. And here is the final irony. Carney never raised his voice. He never called Trump names. He framed everything as modernization, risk management, strategic diversification, the language of responsible governance. Calm, technical, impossible to attack emotionally. If Trump escalates, he looks reckless. If he backs down, he looks outmaneuvered. If he ignores it, the shifts continue quietly in the background. Carney didn't confront Trump, he moved the board underneath him. This is how influence is lost. Not in one big moment, but in the quiet erosion of assumptions. Trump put Canada's energy on the menu. He believed Canada would fold. Instead, Canada built new tables in Europe, in Asia, in the Gulf, and sat down somewhere else. The deals are signed, the contracts are in place. The ships will sail, energy will flow. Just not always south first. Trump called it leverage. History might call it the moment America pushed its closest ally out the door. If this made you think, drop a comment below. What do you think happens next? Does Washington course correct? Or does Canada keep walking? And if you learned something today that you didn't know before, hit that like button and subscribe. We cover the stories that are moving quietly underneath the headlines. You don't want to miss what's coming next.